This is a tourist map of Gaza City from 2011. It was published by Palestinian software company Midad, highlighting some of the sites of interest. Dozens of restaurants, beach hotels, 80 mosques, 2 churches, and a 13th century palace. Now, many of these landmarks lie in ruins, since Israel's assault on the enclave in response to Hamas attacks in October 2023, and 18 months of widespread destruction since then.
مش خايف انا مرعوب من البغص انا بدي الامور تنتهي احنا بنطالب بانهاء الحرب فورا.
Gaza was a major port in antiquity, but became a backwater of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. In 1917, it came under British control.
On favoring the establishment of a national home for Jews, forgot intentionally to safeguard the civil rights of the non-Jewish population.
After Egypt took control in the late 1940s, its beaches and cheap shops made it a popular holiday destination for Egyptian tourists. But it also became the landing point for refugees, driven from their homes in other parts of pre-1948 Palestine. Israel seized control in 1967. Despite decades of war, a few landmarks survived until the hostilities of the past year and a half. These are some of those landmarks before and after October 7th. Gaza City's modern harbor was the Strip's main fishing port and a source of income for tens of thousands of people, including for hotels and restaurants. It was a place where families could gather to eat seafood and watch the sun set on the Mediterranean. Israel attacked the port in the first weeks of the latest hostilities. It said Hamas used the harbor as a training facility for seaborne militants to attack Israeli coastal targets, and that it found militant tunnels there. Hamas never confirmed this. Amid widespread hunger, fishermen say they have been desperately casting nets from the shore, hoping to catch enough for their families to eat. The Great Omari Mosque in Gaza City is the oldest in the enclave. It occupies a site in the old town that has held religious significance for thousands of years. The Romans built a temple there, and early Christians a church. A mosque was first built in the 7th century after Gaza was conquered by Omar ibn al-Khattab, the Muslim ruler after whom the mosque is named. The structure was heavily damaged by Israeli airstrikes in December 2023. Israel's military said it hit a, quote, tunnel shaft and terror tunnel. It has accused Hamas of building tunnels beneath civilian structures and using civilians as human shields. Half the medieval minaret and some walls survived, and worshippers have continued to pray on its grounds. The Palestine Soccer Stadium in Gaza City is one of the largest in the Strip, where the sport is hugely popular. Palestine fields an international men's soccer team, but players from Gaza have long had problems getting through border checkpoints to play abroad. The stadium used to host matches between local clubs and was a training ground for other athletes. Its playing field is now crowded with humanitarian tents as temporary shelters for displaced families. Next to the Omari Mosque sits the Al-Qasaria Market. The covered markets of the Old Town were once the economic heart of Gaza City. In peaceful times, brides would come here to buy jewelry. In harder times, desperate families would instead sell their gold to survive. Israel has blamed Hamas for the damage to the historic market and adjoining Omari Mosque. The Hamas-run Gaza government media office said the accusations were false and were made, quote, to justify the war crimes of destroying centuries-old tourist places. Palestinians have already begun documenting the damage and trying to clear the debris. But rebuilding cannot start in earnest until the fighting stops. Israel announced in April it intends to seize large areas of the blockaded territory as part of an Israeli-controlled security zone. It says it aims to drive Hamas from power and free the hostages still held by the militant group. U.S. President Donald Trump wants to redevelop Gaza as a Riviera of the Middle East, cleared of Palestinians once the current conflict is over. Arab countries, though, have rejected Trump's vision, proposing an alternative rebuilding plan. Though who will run Gaza and who will pay for reconstruction remain unanswered questions.
A movement like nobody's ever seen before.
U.S. President Donald Trump was elected on the hope he would fight inflation and boost the economy. But as his 100th day in office approaches, Americans are giving him poor marks in both those areas. A Reuters Ipsos poll this week showed that just 37% of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the economy, down from the first days of his presidency, in which he promised to bring about a golden age of America. Trump has kicked off his term with an aggressive economic agenda, sparking trade wars as he slaps tariffs on trading partners and setting off the worst sell-off in U.S. financial markets since the start of the pandemic 5 years ago. Now, 3/4 of the poll respondents said they worried a recession was coming. And more than half of the respondents, including 1 in 4 Republicans, said Trump's moves to shake up the economy are, quote, too erratic. Trump has also rattled markets by intimating he could fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, the nation's top official tasked with controlling inflation. But on Tuesday, Trump pulled back on that threat.
I have no intention of firing him.
Trump has also pressured the Fed to lower interest rates, but Powell, like Wall Street economists, has said that Trump's moves to raise tariffs could push inflation higher. To be sure, a large swath of the country still backs Trump, many fervently. But despite his widespread party support, the poll showed that 1 in 3 Republicans said their cost of living was on the wrong track. As one senior fellow at a conservative think tank put it, quote, "Everything that's supposed to be up is down. Everything that's supposed to be down is up."
Funerals have begun for 26 men who were killed when suspected militants opened fire at tourists in India's Jammu and Kashmir territory, police said on Wednesday. The worst attack on civilians in the country in nearly 2 decades has shattered the relative calm in Kashmir, where tourism has boomed as an anti-India insurgency has waned in recent years. India's Interior Minister Amit Shah visited the scenic Himalayan Federal Territory on Wednesday, where police say 25 Indians and 1 Nepalese national were killed. 17 others were injured. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has cut short his 2-day visit to Saudi Arabia, returning to New Delhi on Wednesday morning. The attack is a setback to his Hindu Nationalist Party, who have projected bringing peace and development to the long-troubled Muslim-majority region as a major achievement. A little-known militant group, the Kashmir Resistance, claimed responsibility for the attack in a social media message. They said in a statement the individuals targeted were not ordinary tourists, but were affiliated with Indian security agencies. India's security agencies say Kashmir Resistance is a front for Pakistan-based militant organisations. Pakistan's Foreign Ministry has extended condolences to the families of those killed and says it only provides moral and diplomatic support to the insurgency in Kashmir. Tourists have begun to flee the region, cutting their holidays short.
I do not have words to express how sad and frightened we are. We were supposed to stay in Kashmir for 2 more days, but we have cancelled our tour now and are moving back to Jammu.
India's Aviation Minister's office said 4 special flights out of the area have been arranged, with more kept on standby. Protesters took to the streets across the region on Tuesday, with some chanting anti-Pakistan slogans, while others called for India's Home Affairs Minister to step down. Militant violence has afflicted Kashmir, claimed in full but ruled in part by both Hindu-majority India and Islamic Pakistan since the anti-Indian insurgency began in 1989. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, although violence has tapered off in recent years. Security sources said about 100 suspected past militant sympathisers were called to police stations and questioned. Police have also released sketches of 3 of the suspected attackers.
Fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
President Donald Trump told reporters outside the White House on Wednesday that the U.S. was still, quote, actively negotiating with China on trade. This after a source familiar with the matter said the White House is considering lowering tariffs on imported Chinese goods pending talks with Beijing. The source's comments followed a Wall Street Journal report that the White House is considering cutting its tariffs on Chinese imports in a bid to de-escalate tensions. Citing a White House official, the paper said China tariffs could come down from their current level of 145% to between 50 and 65%. Trump spoke with reporters at the White House, but did not address the specifics of the Journal report.
Everything's active. Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine.
Earlier, in remarks at the Institute of International Finance, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that high tariffs between the U.S. and China are not sustainable, and that Beijing needed to change tack.
There is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together.
Bessent added that the third quarter of this year is a reasonable estimate for achieving clarity on the ultimate level of Trump's tariffs. In addition to steep tariffs on China, Trump has also imposed a blanket 10% tariff on all other U.S. imports and higher duties on steel, aluminum, and autos. He has also suspended targeted tariffs on dozens of other countries until July 9th and floated additional industry-specific levies on pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. That has roiled financial markets and raised fears.
Russian President Vladimir Putin told a meeting of the State Military-Industrial Commission Wednesday that Russian armed forces were still short of certain weapons, including drones, despite a big boost in production. The discussion occurred the same day Ukrainian officials said a Russian drone hit a bus, killing 9 workers, as the war between the two countries continues. Reuters was able to confirm the location of the video from the corroborating aftermath photographs from the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Meanwhile, U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials held meetings on Wednesday to try to get peace talks back on track, after the cancellation of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's trip raised questions over how much progress was being made. The director of the Russian and Eurasia program at Chatham House, James Nixie, was not optimistic.
I think really we're heading away from negotiations right now and back into conflict without a foreseeable end. Not to say again that the two sides can go on forever, but they've both got more left in them, militarily speaking.
U.S. President Donald Trump warned that Washington could walk away if there was no progress on a deal soon. He raised the pressure on Sunday when he said he hoped Moscow and Kyiv would make a deal this week to end the 3-year conflict. At the heart of Wednesday's talks was an attempt to establish what Ukraine can possibly accept, after Trump Special Envoy Steve Witkoff presented proposals to a similar session in Paris last week. 3 diplomats said those proposals appeared to demand more concessions from Ukraine than Russia.
The US just wants any deal. And that, it doesn't matter whether it's a good deal for Ukraine or a good deal for Russia, they want to be able to show that they are a broker and maybe a power player, that they can have an influence on events. There's a real difference there, because for the Ukrainians, a bad deal is worse than no deal.
Sources said Witkoff's proposals, which included recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea and ruling out Ukraine's NATO membership, were unacceptable to Ukraine and other European nations.
Could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
New Jersey officials on Wednesday said a massive wildfire burning in the state's Pinelands was on track to become one of the worst in state history. The Jones Road wildfire had consumed some 12,500 acres and was 40% contained as of Wednesday afternoon. Bill Donnelly is New Jersey's Forest Fire Service Chief.
You guys have to remember, New Jersey has some of the most volatile wildland fuels in the entire country. You know, everybody's used to seeing California and things like that, that chaparral that burns up them hills and goes crazy. Well, these pine barrens out here are the exact same type of fuel model. They are just like having napalm spread across the ground. It's, you know, on the right conditions, when humidity's low and fires become wind-driven, it's just, you can have catastrophic fires as a result of those conditions coming together.
Donnelly said that so far this year, New Jersey has experienced nearly twice as many wildfires than usual. The latest blaze started on Tuesday in the Greenwood Forest Wildlife Management Area in Ocean County, about halfway between Asbury Park and Atlantic City. The fire is expected to continue to burn for several days until rain comes on Friday or Saturday. It was no longer threatening populated areas. The cause of the fire remains under investigation.
Unilever beat estimates for first quarter sales growth on Thursday. The maker of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and Dove soap reported a 3% increase for the period. It was helped by price rises and strong demand for its premium products. Unilever further said it expected the direct impact of tariffs to be limited. Consumer goods companies have struggled to regain shopper loyalty after sharply hiking prices for years. And they've more recently seen unpredictable shopping habits shaped by fears over the impact of US tariffs. Such firms were also forced to raise prices and accept thinner margins due to elevated costs resulting from the pandemic. That was made worse by soaring energy prices after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Thursday's update marks Unilever's first since it surprised investors in February by removing former CEO Heinz Schumacher. The firm appointed CFO Fernando Fernandez as his successor in March. Unilever had laid out cost cuts last year under its previous boss. That included separating the ice cream division through a demerger and cutting thousands of jobs to address years of underperformance. Unilever said it was confident about its full-year plans despite the global uncertainty. It also sees savings of close to $730 million flowing from its productivity plan by the end of the year. Nestlé posted better than expected first quarter organic sales growth on Thursday. It was up 2.8% in the first quarter, above analyst forecasts. The world's biggest packaged food company hiked prices for its Kit Kat chocolate bars and Nescafé coffee. Its 2.1% price increases were also more than market watchers expected. The Swiss company also kept its outlook for this year. It said it still expects organic sales growth to improve and estimates an underlying trading operating profit margin of around 16%. CEO Laurent Frex said the outlook was based on Nestlé's assessment of the direct impacts of US tariffs. However, he added the indirect impact of the duties was unclear. US President Donald Trump has imposed broad tariffs on several countries. It's caused worries the US will be pushed into recession as commodities and basic utilities become more expensive. The US is one of Nestlé's biggest markets.
Boeing has confirmed that its Chinese customers are refusing to take delivery of new jets as tariffs raise prices. Speaking Wednesday, Chief Executive Kelly Ortberg said many airlines in China now won't accept deliveries. 2 737 MAX jets which had been ferried to the country returned to the US last week. Then on Thursday, a third new plane, slated for Air China, started making its way back. Reports by Bloomberg last week claimed that Beijing has actually ordered carriers not to accept new planes. It all could be a big headache for Boeing, with China accounting for about 10% of its airliner order backlog. The company had been due to deliver about 50 new planes to the country just this year. However, Ortberg says Boeing can find solutions. He says unwanted jets can easily be diverted to new customers, since the air travel sector currently faces a global shortage of new planes. Even so, Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs spell chaos for the industry. Airliners had been traded free from all duties under a global agreement dating back to 1979. While Washington has now signalled a willingness to de-escalate the dispute, analysts say confusion over tariffs could leave many aircraft orders in limbo. Earlier this month, Delta Airlines said it would defer all deliveries of jets from Airbus while the trade war lasted. Chief Executive Ed Bastian said Trump's 20% duty on imports from Europe meant the math didn't work. The new dispute is also terrible timing for Boeing, which was only just recovering from a near 5-year freeze on exports of its 737 MAX jets to China. That followed restrictions imposed by Beijing after 2 fatal crashes involving the type.